At 9:29 p.m. on April 4, 2026, Soulmate went dark. The 46-foot sailboat belonging to Brian Hooker and Lynette Hooker, a Michigan couple living full-time on the water near Marsh Harbor, Great Abaco Island, stopped broadcasting its position, speed, and identity for the next 11 hours. That same evening, Lynette Hooker disappeared. The Coast Guard Investigative Service is now treating her case as a possible murder. And the 11-hour silence on a vessel that should have been transmitting continuously is the question federal investigators have not publicly answered. The version of this story most people have heard is missing the piece that matters most. If you want every confirmed development in the Lynette Hooker case as it surfaces, subscribe now because this investigation is still moving. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old, a mother, a sailor, a Michigan native who had built her retirement around the open water with the man she had chosen to share it with. On the evening of April 4, 2026, she vanished in the waters off the Bahamas. Brian Hooker told authorities the couple had been returning to Soulmate in an 8-foot dinghy. He said the seas turned rough. He said she fell overboard. He said the currents pulled them apart. He was held in the Bahamas for 5 days, questioned, released without charge. He had pledged publicly to remain on the islands and search for his wife. He left almost immediately and has not returned. The Coast Guard Investigative Service opened a criminal investigation within days. As of June 10, 2026, federal sources have confirmed it is now being treated as a possible murder. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorney has stated he maintains his innocence and had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance. But the GPS data tells a story that does not match the one he gave. And the AIS data tells one even harder to explain. There is a question almost no one asked in the first weeks of this investigation. If the Coast Guard Investigative Service had already opened a criminal case, why was Soulmate allowed to sit in Marsh Harbor for nearly a month? The answer is jurisdiction. Soulmate was moored in Bahamian territorial waters. Conducting a full forensic seizure on foreign soil without formal consent from local authorities is not something American federal agents can simply decide to do. So they waited. They monitored. They built the foundation of an operation that would activate the moment the vessel crossed into United States jurisdiction. That window opened in early May 2026. 2 commercial delivery captains, not suspects, not persons of interest, hired hands paid to move the boat, departed Marsh Harbor on a Friday, heading toward Fort Pierce, Florida. They had no idea what was waiting for them on open water. Why didn't Brian Hooker travel with the vessel he had called home for years? He had already returned to the United States weeks earlier. He was not on board when Soulmate left the Bahamas. The Coast Guard Investigative Service had been preparing for this moment. Surface vessels, airborne assets, a coordinated, multi-layered interdiction built over weeks. From the moment Soulmate cleared Bahamian waters, the operation was in motion. The 2 captains were being tracked from above and from the water. They simply did not know it. And what happened next was captured frame by frame on federal footage released through a Freedom of Information Act request. Approximately 40 nautical miles off the coast of Melbourne, Florida, in early May 2026, Coast Guard agents closed in. Multiple vessels, air support, a 46-foot sailboat on the open Atlantic with 2 hired captains who believed they were on a routine delivery run. Agents boarded. They confirmed how many people were on board. They asked about weapons. They asked the destination. The captains answered every question directly, and then the agents informed them the vessel was being seized. The reaction was not fear. It was not preparation. It was something else entirely. The kind of reaction that only surfaces when a person learns, in real time, that they have sailed directly into the center of a federal criminal investigation they knew nothing about. What investigators found on board in the hours that followed: within minutes of boarding, Soulmate's engine lost power and could not be restarted. A 46-foot sailboat, no propulsion, 40 nautical miles from shore. The vessel would now have to be towed back, every step performed under the precise legal requirements of a federal seizure. Do you think the 11-hour AIS blackout on Soulmate starting at 9:29 p.m. on April 4th, 2026 points to a system failure, or does the reactivation timestamp tell a different story? If the next federal filing shifts what we know, you'll want to be here for it. The tow was handled by the U.S. CGC Winslow Greiser, a fast response cutter assigned to pull Soulmate the 40 nautical miles back to land. Sources familiar with the operation described the weather that night as among the worst those crews had encountered in their careers. A seized vessel, no engine power, severe conditions. Every action documented to courtroom standards. As Soulmate approached Fort Pierce, the cutter handed the tow to a smaller Coast Guard vessel for the narrow marina entry. On Monday, May 12, 2026, the boat arrived at Coast Guard Station Fort Pierce, Florida. The first thing investigators did was not step on board. The first thing they did was put up the tape. Crime scene tape, visible at a federal dock. That single act communicated what no press release had yet stated directly. This vessel was no longer being held for administrative review. It was a crime scene. In the days that followed, agents moved on and off Soulmate in a steady, methodical rhythm. Items were brought off the boat and cataloged on a designated table set up dockside. The process was quiet, focused, built to survive any future challenge in a federal court of law. Within days, the boat was relocated again, this time to Coast Guard Station Fort Lauderdale. The reason was infrastructure. Fort Pierce did not have the equipment to lift the vessel fully out of the water. Fort Lauderdale did. And lifting Soulmate out of the water was exactly what the next phase of the forensic examination required. But the most significant detail in this entire phase has received almost no public attention. Evidence collected from Soulmate is now being processed at the FBI laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. The Coast Guard Investigative Service remains the lead agency. That has not changed. What has changed is what is now sitting inside one of the most advanced forensic facilities in the world. The FBI laboratory at Quantico does not process routine inquiries. It handles the most complex, the most consequential, and the most demanding evidence in federal investigations. The fact that materials tied to Lynette Hooker's disappearance have been sent there is not procedural housekeeping. It is escalation. This is no longer a missing person matter being managed at the local level. It is being processed at the tier of forensic capability reserved for the federal government's most serious cases, and whatever Quantico is currently extracting from those devices. This brings us back to the 11 hours. Most vessels of any meaningful size carry an automatic identification system, AIS. It transmits a vessel's identity, speed, and precise position continuously. Maritime authorities use it. Commercial tracking services use it. Other vessels in the area use it. For Soulmate, a 46-foot ocean-going sailboat, AIS is standard equipment. On the night of April 4th, 2026, Soulmate's AIS was broadcasting normally. At 9:29 p.m., the same evening Lynette Hooker disappeared, it stopped. The signal went completely dark. It did not resume until 8:40 a.m. on April 5th, 2026. More than 11 hours of silence on a system designed to never go silent. A maritime law expert reviewed the data and described the timing as highly unusual. A former federal prosecutor specializing in no-body homicide cases said the difference between a system that fails and a system that is deliberately deactivated matters enormously. When a system fails, it tends to stop and stay stopped. When a system goes dark and then comes back online hours later, that pattern is consistent with something else entirely. Brian Hooker had lived aboard Soulmate full-time. He knew the vessel. He knew its systems. He knew its equipment. And the GPS told its own story. The location data recovered from Brian Hooker's electronic devices did not match the account he gave investigators about where he was when his wife went into the water. That contradiction is what authorized the next move. The Royal Bahamas Police Force formally approved a United States request to send a federal dive team into previously unsearched areas of the Sea of Abaco, waters approximately 25 feet deep. The search area was identified using GPS data that pointed to a location Brian Hooker had not disclosed. Coast Guard divers, a submersible robot, canine teams searching the land. The Bahamas search everyone was told had ended is back in active operation. Lynette Hooker's daughter, Carly Ellsworth, has been a constant public presence throughout this investigation. She called for an intensive review of the facts surrounding her mother's disappearance. On Mother's Day 2026, she posted a video message. She did not speak about evidence or warrants. She spoke about her mother. She said it was the first Mother's Day without her. She said it was hard to accept that her mother was no longer just a text away. Family members have submitted DNA samples to assist investigators. That decision carries its own weight. The full understanding of what those samples may eventually be used to confirm. No-body homicide prosecutions are difficult by design. They typically lack three critical anchors: when, where, and how the death occurred. But this case is unusual. By Brian Hooker's own account, investigators know roughly when. They know roughly where. They know the water was involved. What they are now building, piece by piece, is the rest. This is not without precedent. In the Tom Capano case in Delaware, prosecutors secured a conviction for the murder of Anne Marie Fahey, even though her body, placed in a cooler and sunk at sea, was never recovered. Water disposal cases are notoriously difficult. They are also not impossible. The federal record shows that more than half of all no-body homicide prosecutions that have reached trial involve domestic relationships, and water remains the most common disposal location precisely because recovery is so difficult. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorney, Crystal Marie Hauer, has asked the public to extend him the benefit of the doubt. Those statements stand on the record alongside everything else. But the architecture of this investigation has shifted. Soulmate is lifted out of the water at Coast Guard Station Fort Lauderdale. Evidence is at the FBI laboratory at Quantico. The Sea of Abaco dive is active. The GPS contradiction is documented. The 11-hour AIS blackout is documented. And a daughter named Carly Ellsworth is still waiting. If this case matters to you, the next confirmed development is one you won't want to miss. Whether the FBI laboratory at Quantico has already finished extracting data from Soulmate's onboard systems, and what that extraction may have recovered about the 11-hour AIS blackout, is a question federal investigators have not yet answered publicly.